17th, and we're going to start it off with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could join me. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so clerk, could you conduct the roll call?
Supervisor Mulhern?
Here.
Chair Hashak?
Here. All right, so just like to report that on Friday, we had a special meeting of the General Government Committee dealing with some of the ordinance issues, and I thought that that went really well. It was well attended, and there was a good give and take. And so thank you everyone who participated in that. So today we have agenda item number 2A, which is discussion and possible action, including providing recommendations to staff and a referral to the Board of Supervisors, recommending approval of the County of Mendocino Cannabis Department monthly update for March. And as you can see, we have Steve Dunnicliff here, who's the interim Cannabis Department Director. And then we also have John Burks and Elora Babini. So thank you. And I guess your titles are Deputy Director or what? I don't know. Do we have a title for what you're doing?
Yeah. Hello, Steve Dunnicliff, interim cannabis director. And at this time, Mr. Burks is still being referred to as being on a special assignment from the executive office. And Elora, of course, continues to be our chief planner.
All right. So did you have anything to add, Supervisor? Okay, so Mr. Dunnicliff, you could start us off?
Yes, absolutely. And for this item, starting it off, I'm just going to very quickly refer this one over to Mr. Burks, who I know is ready to give us some opening comments and walk your committee through the report. And we'll be here available for comments, questions afterwards.
Good morning, Chair, Supervisor, County Council, Interim Director, Community. Good to see everyone. Thank you. My name is John Burks, and I'm on special assignment from the Executive Office to assist the Cannabis Department with some, processes and anywhere that I can fill in to be supportive to them. So I will just try to give you a very quick idea of how this report was generated. It is different than the previous few months of reports that were submitted. So part of my task in developing some process management was to help identify some goals of the department to help there be sort of a unified bit of messaging. So this report is a first attempt, and you'll see that it includes a mission statement which was developed by the team. So that wasn't just written by the director or myself. It was a genuine team effort to find out their priorities and what they felt, would be the best for the department moving forward. So what you see there is the team's representation of a good mission statement. I also support the recommendation made by MCA regarding the timely component of the mission statement. I thought that was excellent, and I will request, as long as the interim director approves, to have that added.
Very good. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, thank them. They're the ones who do all the work. The department priorities, I think, are very important and relevant to have a North Star to identify exactly what it is that we're working on at any given time so that there's a clear line of communication with the public, also with the General Government Committee and the board for what are our priorities. We have kind of two sides of the house, so I'm assisting with administration, and the chief planner is obviously doing all of the planning related functions. And what we thought would be helpful is if we list those priorities that were created out of board direction in the past. At some point in the future, what we would request is that maybe there's some help prioritizing those, giving them an order in which, given if there's ever limited resources, that we have an ability to attack the highest priority items first and then work our way down. We think that the way that they're presented here are, fairly accurate, but that'd be a good conversation for another day, I think, and also for the community to think about as they read and interact with these. And so the department activity, I wanted to try to create sort of the simplest understanding of what our workload is. And I think that it's divided into these two categories. We have applications that have not been turned into issued permits, and then we also have issued permits, which that's where renewals end up. So I just wanted the simplest, just start at the very beginning, just the most basic component. So that's what you see there.
If we could go back to the priorities.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely.
Ju- As a, I've said it for a long time about the big picture for the cannabis department is to get people through to their permits, right? And so, we have a lot of other things going on in the department, but I think overall, like the mission statement says, is to issue cannabis cultivation permits, right?
Absolutely could not agree more. And so you'll notice that staff support being a top priority, that falls under, I think, good management and leadership, right? Because ultimately, it's the line staff that are going to be issuing or getting the applicants to issuance. So that's why that is a top priority, to make sure that they have the tools and resources they need as management. So we believe very strongly in that. And you'll see that the way we have it structured right now are all support to that function. And we hope that we really embody that, and that should be demonstrable in the results. I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing we can focus on, is getting those, either permits issued, or if for some reason that there's, the applicant is not able to, comply with all the standards, that, we're able to take those off of our plate in some capacity, as long as due process is afforded. So, okay. Any other comments for priorities, or is that, for priorities?
No.
Okay,
But
perfect.
thank you for those comments.
My pleasure. That's what I'm here for. Okay, so then under permit status, if we take those two buckets and we kind of break them down into two segments, I'll just keep this simple. And again, you'll notice there's some notes on here about the accuracy of the numbers. We're going through a bit of a data management revamp right now to make sure that these numbers are accurate and that we have the systems in place to give simple results, just something that we can understand and then transmit to both the public and to the board. So there's going to be some asterisks in this report, maybe into the future here, but we're getting a handle on that very quickly. So under permit status, those are the ones that are either issued or they have renewals in there. And then priority processing, that was the Gantt chart that the department had produced over the past 2 monthly reports of how many applications and renewals needed to be processed with that DCC timeline. So we're using this as probably the highest priority bit of where to begin with our workload. That's where we're choosing to focus on as relevant and obtainable marks of success. And so, Chair Hashek, once upon a time you said that you wanted to know if we were on track. And I think that is the best way to find out if we're on track, is to stick with this chart. I believe strongly it represents probably the highest need of the applicants in the department at this time. So all of these other components you see with the process management, the way that we're changing our data, and all of those things is to support this, primary goal. And so I hope that you find that satisfactory, and I hope that I feel very strongly that we're going to be able to produce quickly as these systems come online. So,
And certainly, excuse me.
Go ahead.
That certainly a question has been about the deprioritized, and as they hopefully pay their past taxes and all that, that when they come online, then they will be incorporated into this. At this point, though, we don't have that as part of our, the plan, the time plan, right?
That's correct, and I'm hopeful, and I think that we'll have data to back this up as we consciously work on streamlining efforts as applicants come back into being prioritized, is that our efficiencies will be able to absorb them and we'll be able to stay on track. And I know that the community and the board have heard lots of things over the years that, relying on John Burke's gut instinct is probably not what you want to hear at this stage in time. But I honestly believe that's my instinct, is that as we become more efficient, we'll be able to incorporate those in the numbers and still stay on track.
Okay.
And if the chief planner has anything to say about that, I'd like you to weigh in.
Yeah, so I think that, with the continued assistance of our contract planners, we're still going to be able to get people who we currently have as our priority, which are our DCC expirations, on target. We do have a heightened review because we are using the 15-day correction letter process, and we really need to stay within those shortened timeframes to be able to make that review. So when we have extensions requested, it does push out those reviews, but those extensions are requested by the applicants because they may need more time to produce the materials that are requested. But as we move through these reviews, we are trying to stay on target with the July and August expirations as we currently have our prioritized folks, and then incorporating the deprioritized people as they become reprioritized.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll resume unless there's any further questions. So that is the ultimate are we on track or not chart at this point, and we'll be referring to that a lot moving forward. So if there's any direction that you would like to provide in terms of what we could do differently, we're open to that.
Well, one question
Of course.
about the chart of whether we're on time or not. Does this take into consideration the SSHRs, sensitive species and habitat reviews, and the process with CDFW?
So currently, we began training with our contract planners at the end of March. We do have to allow for a 30-day referral time, and so it really just depends on the response time from our sensitive species habitat review. We are looking at potentially more a mid-May, I think, for most of our April reviews. We have had some requests for extensions from the applicants from that 15-day correction letter process, which does push that date out a little bit more for those individual reviews. But that's not for the entirety of our July expiration folks.
Okay.
Okay, and my hope is that if we do run late on our first target, was over time, as we become more efficient, we'll absorb those, and you'll get the real-time information on if that's working or not, and can advise accordingly.
Well, I think that's what we want. We want the real information about the reality of what's going on and the timelines and how we're doing with them. And so I really appreciate this effort.
Absolutely, and that's what we want to do, is just get to the basic deliverables, just for simplicity's sake at this moment in time. I think that's what we need to focus on. Okay, and then you'll see application status. I did read in MCA's document, which was very thoughtful and comprehensive, and I appreciate that that they take the amount of time to produce these. That is really informative, so thank you. You'll see non-responsive or inadequate material. I did have a note on that particular component. There were some requests in that, and maybe I'll touch on it, because I would be happy to go line by line. I took lots of notes, if we get to that, if you choose it as a reasonable item to address. I do have lots of notes on that. I guess I'll just leave it simply as this: non-responsive or inadequate. To break that down further, I think that's obviously going to be a possibility as we get the data management under control. But as of this time, I think that's honestly probably the best that I could do. But
Okay.
I'll look to improve that in the future, I guess is what I can say.
Supervisor?
Thanks, Mr. Burks. At this point, I don't think that's a priority for me, defining it. I really want to be able to get as many people through the process as possible. And I understand that you're balancing trying to provide information to the board, to the public, to the applicants, of course. And I really want for the department to be able to prioritize and strategize getting the most people their permits. And whether they're non-responsive or haven't turned in the materials, to me at this point is not a priority. If they have their materials and they're getting processed, I believe the department has let every applicant know which materials they're missing at this point, and some of them many, many times. So I just want to say that for me, breaking down that number is not a priority at this point. I want to see people get through the permitting process.
I totally agree, and I will take that as a direction, and hopefully, you know, all of those folks are getting, you know, correspondence from us and communications, which I believe that they are, but we're working on making sure that they have all those opportunities. But at the same time, take this time now while we're, you know, working through our chart. If there is any, you know, questions or comments or concerns you might have as an applicant, just, you know, go ahead and reach out. We'll do everything we can. So I agree, and thank you for that. Yeah, I will keep that in mind as far as priorities go, because I couldn't agree more with making sure we're focusing our energy in the right places. So I think the LEAP grant is pretty self-explanatory, along with the LJ. We use some language that was already posted to the website and in Canada notes for the LJ grant. And there definitely will be details to follow on both of these. I would just like to reassure the General Government Committee and the community that I have spent a fair amount of time, along with the Executive Office, you know, looking into these to get those to maximum efficiency and production. I was primarily focused, let's see, I think I started with the Cannabis Department on March 7th, and so I feel like we've cleared the first major hurdle of process management, which if at any point anybody has questions of what I mean by that, I'll happily explain. Now we're moving into more of the functional pieces. Those are definitely two of them. I may not have a lot of information to provide at this moment, but those details will certainly be coming. So I think that's pretty much the report. Oh, and then the efficiency study. I mean, we are tracking time differently now in the department as like one component of how to evaluate those processes that we have and how to improve them. And we felt that it was responsible to report. We think that it is going to be less than 200 hours, and we'll have a better idea in the upcoming weeks as we study both the contract planners and the staff planners of what we think those timeframes are in reality. But I did want to report as a bit of good news that we feel strongly in the department that it's going to be less on average. And then again, we'll use data to back that up. That's the goal. So I think that's the report in general, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, and the chief planner has a comment.
And
Yeah.
if through the chair, Elora Babini, chief planner. As of this weekend, we also upped our contract planners to 17 contract planners after the 12 was in this report.
Okay, so we had 12 originally, and then now we're upping it to 17. And there was questions before about the training manual or whatever, what was being used to kind of teach them how to do the substantive reviews about the permits, the process. So do we have any update on that? Like, how'd that training go, and what was used to train them?
Sure. Elora Babini, chief planner, Mendocino County Cannabis Department. We did virtual trainings with all of the contract planners. I created a PowerPoint, and we used our guidance materials that are current in draft form, as well as our checklists that we've produced. We've also, I do 4 hours a week of individual training with our contract planners where we have working sessions. We also try to do 4 to 8 hours with our staff planners in-house as well, so that we have working meetings, so that we can continue to review applications. This last Monday on the 10th, I did an virtual, since most of our contract planners are out of the area, we did a virtual sensitive species habitat review training with all of the planners, our in-house staff, as well as our contract planners, so that we went through the referral process for that. On Wednesday last week, we also did a compliance plan training so that they would know how to review applications, do a building review, and be able to compliance plan any structures that were existing and unpermitted.
Okay, and so as the 5 new ones come on board, then they'll get a training, or do you have this, like, you're going to do that individually or
So
as a group?
I've worked really closely with Fort Leaf's management team to be able to train them and provide them the guidance materials, and so they will be helping with the assistance of training those folks. as well as they'll be joining our working meetings as well. They have all the guidance materials, which I have kind of culminated into a folder for them so that they have all of those, as well as our templates for any emails or 15-day corrections that go out. And so we've been working really closely with them. Almost on a daily basis, I meet with the four-leaf management team every morning for about 30 minutes to an hour to go over application reviews on their processing and how that's going for them.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Burks?
I've always wanted to do this, so thank you.
It should be yellow.
Oh, I know, I didn't have one, so. It is, yeah, it's a real thing. So happy. I guess I'm a bit of a rebel in this case. I will definitely get the right one. So part of what my role is the like with the chief planner, the former director, the current director, is the subject matter experts right now in the department are, I guess the best expression, the only expression that's coming to mind, are drinking from the fire hose, right? There's just more coming at them. So my role in process management is to capture those things. So if there's a document that's being used as guidance, or it's in draft form, or all these really wonderful things that, you know, the chief is pulling together to make this work, that's where that's what I'm hoping to serve as in the department over the next few months, is to capture all of that and to make it official and to, you know, put letterhead on, you know, just make it real. So even though they're fantastic as they are, that's what I aim to do, is to provide that clarity. So I know that in the MCA memo, there was a request for sort of the, you know, step-by-step process where it's probably intuitive to a planner because they do it for a living. They have educations based around that. But for somebody like me who doesn't have that experience, it's a great opportunity because I can ask simple questions. I can sort of capture that in a way that would make sense to me, and then I think would translate to the community and to the board and for everybody. So I hope that to kind of piggyback off of that is those things are definitely getting nailed down, and they'll be available for everyone here in the near future.
Yeah, I think that when that kind of information is shared with the community, it provides them a clearer picture of what's being asked for, what the process will be, and probably eliminates a lot of questions down the road, the individual one-on-one questions. And so if that I appreciate that approach.
Elora Babini, Chief Planner, Mendocino County. We are also in the process of working with LACO to develop some guidance materials that would be more culminated together to help the review process, so that in the future we actually have those materials together while balancing, you know, changing direction and how we're streamlining. We want to make sure that we're not producing any materials that are then going to be superseded in the coming months, you know, how we've been discussing in our Friday meeting, and then in September how we're going to be streamlining the process. We want to make sure that we're doing materials in that contract that are going to be beneficial in the long term.
Yeah. Consistent and objective, right? Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that report. So that is that pathway that the county's taking. I guess we have a comment from Supervisor Mulherin, but I'd kind of like to hear about what the pathway with the state, if there's any update with the state after Supervisor Mulherin.
Thank you. I just had a comment on the tax form for clarification. I spoke with the auditor, treasurer, tax collector, and they're going to be updating the documents to include the minimum taxes. That was the intent of the board when they approved that.
Very good. Thank you. Right. So do I go to county council?
I can start, and I think Director Duncliffe will have a bit of an update as well. Information that I have is largely the same as at the time of our special meeting, which was the state was okay in terms of moving back the time of the ordinance adoption to May 9th. We've been talking through some of the logistics, and we actually have a meeting set up for this afternoon to work out some of the details in terms of getting this set up, getting the CEQA contractor in place to be able to perform the EIR, and then additionally the site-specific environmental review for the benefit of the applicants. At the state level, we're still on track with all the input that we got this past week to have a amended ordinance or amended draft ordinance to present to the board on May 9th.
Okay. Thank you.
So with regard to the state's expectation or request on grant modifications, we've got the county's fiscal team is continuing to work through that. What we're finding at this point is that there's a hole of about $1 million of general fund that general fund that will be absorbed by the Cannabis Department this year. It's a significant shift. When the budget was adopted, the expectation had been that there was not a general fund contribution. So it's a dynamic situation that's continuing to evolve. The conversations are slightly more difficult, or well, slightly more complicated by the fact that the LJAGP grant is also going through an audit process right now. So we're in fact working with two different state departments. It's the Department of Cannabis Control would typically be our partner, but in this case, we've also got the state auditor's office involved as well. So again, dynamic and evolving, but it looks like there is going to be a bigger general fund hit in the current year than was expected. And certainly getting certainty on the LJAGP grant as soon as possible is going to be critical for us to understand our operating latitude based on the amount of money that's available for the department to function.
And is there conversations with the state about if we can use the LJAGP money for operational cost
So
beyond the, 4-leaf contract and such?
yes, those conversations are continuing, and we believe that we might have had a little bit more, we would have been in a better place at this time if we had requested modifications prior to the audit process coming in. And so we're just in this tight spot where we need to get through the audit process, continue our conversations with the state. And we do believe that the state is wanting to try to have some grant modifications in front of the board at that same May 9th meeting date. So we expect that this will be resolved quickly, but today we don't have that resolution.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from staff? Supervisor?
Yeah, I would just like to thank the team, and I know that we spent 3 years talking about pivoting, but you all in Willits have done an incredible job of taking the feedback from the community and the board and really implementing it quickly. And I appreciate much of the work that you're doing, including the email to applicants, the mission statement. There's a lot of things that were sort of left open-ended, and I appreciate all the work, the update on the LEAP grant, all of this information that's gone out. I'm wondering, are we going to pause the Zoom meetings until the department is able to get their feet under them, or should people expect to have those meetings again?
Thank you for that question, and it is certainly a desire of ours to do that, but kind of back to your point about how we're kind of carefully using our resources. That's part of why we wanted to bring those overall priorities up so that there's not a feeling that we're not being responsible at that time, because I know that the meetings are valuable and that the community appreciates that time to interact. So it's our goal to get back to that. I just don't have a firm timeline of when, knowing what we have. And the administrative side of the department is the one that I think right now is, missing the most staff per se, but we'll figure it out. And we do want to do that. It's just going to be a little bit. But in the meantime, I'm hoping that our direct emailing, our Canon notes, we're improving the website, just some really simple, quick, easy things that are going to effectively communicate to the community are going to help. Just hold us over.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've heard a lot is, if there could be those kind of the give and take kind of conversations happening before it goes to kind of email back and forths or whatever, that it seemed like with the LEAP grants, with the permitting, if people could sit down and talk and have an interactive discussion, that would seem it would be helpful. So anything you can do on that front, when you're ready, would be appreciated.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, thank you. So with that, I think we'll open it up to public comment. And we will try to keep it to the 3-minute rounds, and see where we get with that.
Good morning, Scott Ward, Redwood Valley. What a breath of fresh air, a refreshing change. Elora and John deserve all the credit in the world for what they've done in such a short amount of time. It's miraculous. Training manuals are really important for staff, just for consistency, and they're a living, breathing document. They get amended all the time with new policies, new questions, and solutions from management. So don't be afraid to put in a new policy and pull out an old one. Just make sure staff is well aware. The training manuals were very helpful to me in my career. 15-day review process. I know we're having a heightened sense of getting it done. How is that, people wanting an extension on the 15 days, how is that accomplished? Do they just send an email and it's granted? Okay. SHHR review, is that done in-house, or is Fish and Wildlife going to have a hand in it?
If I answer, Elora Biden, Chief Planner. So we do an internal review to see if it needs a referral to Fish and Wildlife, and that's done by our planners as well as the contract planners. If it doesn't meet the criteria of being less than significant impact, then it has to be referred based on a previously approved by Fish and Wildlife Exhibit A. Otherwise, it has to be referred to Fish and Wildlife. Part of that is making sure that if you have expanded and you can fill out that contiguous expansion affidavit and you meet that criteria, you should fill that out, which is on our website. If not, and it doesn't meet the 200-foot part of that contiguous expansion, it will automatically have to be referred to Fish and Wildlife.
And is there a contract in place with Fish and Wildlife for those reviews?
To my knowledge, which was a discussion prior when we had discussed, we don't need a contract with Fish and Wildlife. As with any agency that does referrals out to other agencies, it's on the will of the agency whether or not they want to provide comment.
And the 30-day deadline, the Streamline Act, I don't think applies because it's a ministerial permit. So what happens if Fish and Game gets inundated with a bunch, which runs you guys over your anticipated timeline? That's my concern.
Okay.
I don't know if it
Scott,
can be addressed today.
direct your questions to the
I
chair.
apologize.
Thanks.
I apologize. I thought it was last Friday. I'm confused. Okay.
But
so
we'll
those are
try
my
to get your
questions.
concerns
I
answered.
recommend that the grants go under the CEO's office with expertise from the Cannabis Department, just because CEO's office has a grant division. I think it would be better. And I would recommend that you expand the eligibility criteria of the grant to include any law enforcement raid. And good job. Thank you.
Okay. So with the clarification of SSHR and CDFW, that what we were hearing before was that the contract that we are working on for a long time wasn't necessary because the number that we're expecting to go to CDFW aren't the quantity that we first thought. And so they can handle it with their capacity, and we don't need that contract in place. Is that correct?
Laura Babini, Chief Planner. That's correct from the knowledge that I have based on previous discussions that I had. Again, with that 30-day timeline, you send out a referral in any department, and if you get no response within 30 days, you move forward with that application, as in a no comment from the agency that it was sent to.
Okay, so we're going to apply that 30-day. Okay, great. Thank you. Right.
Chair?
Yes.
If I could just real quick respond to the training manuals. Our goal is to capture those, and we have added in the revised lines so we can modify accordingly and as needed. So that is part of our strategy moving forward. So they're not concrete. They're going to change and evolve over time, but it's just, we got to start somewhere, and we're going to capture what we have right now.
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent. Good morning, supervisors, county staff. Thank you very much for holding this meeting. Michael Katz, Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I want to echo Scott's comments and the breath of fresh air and the just general vibes in this place now. Really appreciate everybody's efforts to engage in these conversations. Really appreciate the team deciding to come up with a mission statement. That means a lot to the community, and appreciate the openness for adding the word timely in there. Appreciate the understandings that have been communicated about the different areas within the report. Wondering, obviously, it's going to be hard to figure out when different elements can get restarted, but obviously the community is very interested in knowing when eligibility for equity will be reopened and adjusting for the various law enforcement efforts or actions that were not specifically related to camp. We can certainly continue working with our existing program while we know we're going to be changing it in the future. And, you know, we had a bunch of questions about cobblestone. Obviously, in our memo, we included procedural recommendations. I don't know if we want to address those at this time or maybe during public expression, or if we want to have a workshop beyond this, you know, similar to last Friday's to talk about, as opposed to ordinance streamlining, talk about procedural and process streamlining within the department. Because we obviously have a lot of those, and I'm sure members of the community have suggestions there as well. Really looking forward to seeing the results of the efficiency study, and really just, again, appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, appreciate Supervisor Mulhern checking in with the Treasurer Tax Collector on the minimum tax clarification for the documentation that was provided. And I guess the other question about taxes, and I don't know, again, if this is a public expression or if this is a separate meeting, but in speaking with the Treasurer's Tax Collector's office about the tax appeal process, right now there's a 2-week window from Friday in which people are able to submit appeals for 2022 taxes. We know historically that it has been approved by the board that if there was evidence of non-cultivation, that would be a reason for appeal, but looking through the rest of the ordinance, it appears that there is flexibility to receive appeals for other things besides that as well. And so seeking clarification for operators on what exactly is or is not, if there's any specific restrictions on that appeal process, because folks have a very short window to do that. Apparently, those are decided by MCD, not the Treasurer Tax Collector, so hoping that's something that can be discussed among this committee. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. With those comments about the procedures that you made in the MCA memo, I guess I would like to let Mr. Burks and Laura deal with those procedural questions and work them out internally and see if, you know, what's viable, what's not. And if we can do it that way, it would probably be appreciated by the staff to be able to have some time to see what actually is needed.
Wonderful, and I can say, obviously, we would be very open to sitting down and engaging directly, having meetings to discuss these things and work them out directly, and then potentially bring the results of that back to the committee. You know, we're available as needed to help with this process.
Okay? Is that a good way to move forward?
I'll defer that to the interim director. I mean, we're not opposed to staff, of course.
So, absolutely, the offer to meet and assist is appreciated. I think that what I would like to request is that, especially for this first month coming out of the gate, that we allow Mr. Burks to continue sort of working on what he's been developing, getting those put in place. Once they're available, they can absolutely be shared. And if there are recommendations for refining, or if there's a reason to discuss at that point, we can engage. I would like to try to keep Mr. Burks moving as quickly as possible, though, straight out of the gate.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Yeah. Supervisor.
I have a question for County Council about the appeals process and whether or not a loss of crop, or there are other reasons through which you can appeal. And I see that maybe it's not currently in the ordinance. Is that going to take an item coming back to GGC to change that?
If I may respond to the chair, currently the appeals process allows someone to challenge their tax bill or to appeal the amount charged in the tax for essentially any reason that would be in the ordinance itself, right? So if someone believes that their gross receipts were miscalculated, or they were charged the incorrect amount, you know, they got charged, you know, for a 10,000 when they had a 5,000, you know, these sorts of things, these would be a basis for an appeal. Non-cultivation is something that it was in the ordinance. I know there had been some confusion about that initially, but non-cultivation does exempt someone from the minimum tax in the ordinance, and that is one of the reasons, that's one of the bases identified in the appeal process. Crop loss would not exempt someone from the tax. So if there's a reason someone would want tax relief that isn't currently in the ordinance, the appeals process is not a mechanism to sort of create those new forms of tax relief. It's only a way to address it on a case-by-case basis of whether, as correctly applied, the ordinance or the amount that they were charged is the correct amount under the ordinance. Any new bases for relief would have to be an ordinance change and would have to come back to the board.
Okay. And there was a comment from Mr. Ward about the LEAP program and moving that to the executive office. That was a recommendation from the ad hoc committee last summer to take some of those grant programs out of the department and put them somewhere else. And so I was just wondering if there was any kind of thought to doing that to, if the big picture, goal is to get people to their permits. Should the grants and grant management be done somewhere else? So do you have any comments on that?
So an initial comment is that I believe that the county's contract with Forefront Partners or Elevate Impact had really done a lot of the grant management work and working with the community. That contract is currently out of funds, and we've discussed trying to see if we can get a grant modification in place so that there is additional money to pay for that type of service. So that's where our conversations have been focused to this point.
All right. And I guess at some point when we have more time to take a breath, to see where the proper place should be so that we can do the work that we need to do. Okay. Yeah, Mr. Burks.
Thank you. If with your permission, I'd like to respond to a couple of the comments from Michael Katz.
Sure.
Just a clarification on Cobblestone, to put it as simply as I can, Cobblestone is just a software. So really, it's about resource management at this point. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And so that's one of the things that we're really looking into in how to make sure that people within the department are trained correctly and are processing and just having some really good management systems around how those are progressing. So while it's a little early to make any further comments than that, for public's sake, it's just a software. It's only as good as the amount of information that goes in and comes out. So we're working on that. And then I hope that the results of the efficiency study will be twofold. It'll be deliverables, and also it'll be better information. But I really, again, hope that at the end of the day that the production will be the best example of how the efficiency study is going. Otherwise, we'll do our best to back that up with data as to why it's being successful or could improve.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Humphrey. I'm the president of Bricks Farms and Vineyard. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. And Laura and John, thank you very much for stepping up. I've been watching closely, as we all have, trying to figure out what's going to happen here in Mendocino County. My main focus today is to talk about LEAP funds. My questions are, and I'm trying to come from a very positive place because we're just restarting, and I don't want to come off as being negative. I've heard myself speak before when I do this public stuff, and I sound kind of negative, and I don't smile. So I'm trying to be positive and smile. How much money have you given to Mendocino County cannabis businesses currently from the LEAP funds? How much will you hand out this week? I'm directing it here. How much will you hand out next week? As a farmer and business owner, I'm trying to determine if these funds will be available to affect my 2023 revenue. Basically, everyone knows that 420 is a major holiday for the cannabis business, and it mostly leans towards smoking and partying and everything, but as a cannabis business, It's kind of like our barrel tasting weekend. We get a lot of revenue, a lot of sales, and we're able to take that money, the above average sales and demand that comes before 420, during 420, and right after. We're able to use those funds to buy plants, soil, nutrients, and since it's 2023, we're also paying our taxes, fees, and permits. Today is April 17th. My last clone delivery is currently scheduled for the end of June, roughly 60 days left in my 2023 planning phase for the farm. Once I'm done with the planning phase, it's all execution. I can't bring in any more plants. I can't spend any more money to increase my revenue. And the whole point of this program is for me to increase revenue, pay my taxes. Like, really what we're talking about is revenue in general, so that we don't have these budget shortfalls. If you want to increase the 2023 tax revenue, it needs to happen soon. Basically 60 to 90 days. My main question is, will the LEAP funds and other grants be available to help in 2023? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You did that in a very positive way.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Mr. Burks, do you want to answer those questions about the LEAP program?
I sure will. I'll do my best. Upon my preliminary look at LEAP kind of in its totality, you can see the numbers that I put into our activity report of, you know, how much administrative costs we've used, the amount distributed, which is like 3.1 million, and the amount remaining is you know, 1.7 million. And then, of course, when we total it up, due to the way that the data is structured at this moment in time, I couldn't get it to work the way that I had wanted, but it's certainly a goal. So my first step is to understand what's happening, and my second is to make sure that those are free to be processed. So as far as LEAP waivers go, we have about 100 in the queue. And with any bit of luck, you know, we'll process, and we're still getting them daily. So we're trying to stay ahead of the new ones coming in, right? I mean, that's kind of the administrative tricky part for us, is that when we're getting more than we can process, you know, that's where we get these large queue. But our goal is to become efficient as possible in processing. We're dividing the labor amongst a few people with our limited administrative staff to get these rolling, and then a big part of what I'm here to do is to make sure that for the direct grants that are in Cobblestone, bearing in mind, only software, is that we're responsibly handling those and preventing any unnecessary delays. We don't have total control over that entire process because some review is done outside of the department, but we certainly can control what happens in our department, and that's what I'm focused on right now, is making sure that we eliminate as many roadblocks as quickly as possible, a lot of which to date has just been division of labor and training. So, you know, we're doing that right now, real time. You know, we don't have just the one know-how person, now we have 3. So again, I hope that that reflects in the deliverables as far as this week or next. I'm not sure. What I can tell you, though, is that we do continue to process waivers, and we are in Cobblestone several hours a day right now trying to get things freed up. So I know that's probably not as informative as it can be, but that'll improve over time as I develop a better understanding and we create the processes to support, you know, quick execution.
So the overall picture is that, you know, waivers are still being processed, and that applications are still going through Cobblestone at some rate.
Yeah, we're focused on the ones
So-
that are already in, and then I'll tackle what to do with the ones that haven't made it into that software yet next. But right now, there's something that I can control, and that's what's already in Cobblestone. So we'll have a report, soon about what that looks like in more detail.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rick Foltz. I want to thank everybody for being here and allow us to speak. Thank you all for helping us out. I'm here today to advocate for the applicants who do not have a provisional license. As someone who has put his application in 2017, but still do not have a provisional license, I don't know how to interject when you've jumped through the hoops that the county has placed upon the applicants through the many directors and the many changes that the county has gone through. One of the things I do see that needs to end is actual deprioritization. As someone who's been deprioritized, then reprioritized, then deprioritized, and then reprioritized again, each time without ever being notified that I was deprioritized until I inquired about what was going on with my application. Also, at the same time, while being not provisionally licensed and/or deprioritized, taxes are still being levied on the applicant. I would move that anybody who is an applicant and not being put through the system, but being placed on the back burner, be free of all taxes levied upon them. Because right now, just to appeal the taxes, the county is charging up to almost $2,000 just to submit an appeal. I would also like to ask too, what are the timelines? That's one thing we haven't heard, is what are the timelines for people to make it through the process? And going forward, even with new applicants, are they being given a timeline themselves that you will be processed in this timeline? A yay or nay, that's what people are looking for. So they may adjust whatever process they're going through, whether it be money, taxation, farm expansion, or farms going out of business. So, that's probably my main question is how will non-provisional people be streamlined, because this is a streamlining thing here that the county is offering to push applicants through. And people who cannot be streamlined, will they be offered other ways of being able to get through the county's process? And that's all I have right now. The timeline is important, obviously, because each month there are new provisional licenses that are being done, and with the prioritization of those applicants being pushed through, where does that leave the people who do not have a provisional license at this time? And that's all I have.
And thank you for your email. I just
Oh, thank you for reading
saw it quickly this morning, and
Okay, thank you.
we'll look into it more. Supervisor Mulhern.
Yeah, since I did read your email and I was going to respond to you after the meeting, what was the reason that you were deprioritized? Was it for,
The first time I was deprioritized for non-payment of tax.
okay,
And the reason for that being was, as a person who's been in business for many years, I never realized, and maybe I should have read it closer, but I never realized when I applied that years would go by before I was even looked at or reviewed my applications. I didn't realize, even though I had paid my application fee, which I think at the time was $1,600, that I would not be given my permit to produce and compete in this business atmosphere, but I would be taxed for not being able to do that.
well, okay. Thank you for that. I will reach out to you after the meeting. It does seem like communication was a challenge early on in the program, and it's a challenge that we've continued to try to work through. So thank you for that. I'll be happy to follow up with you after the meeting. And, there's organizations within the county that hopefully you're a member of, and they can help you understand the process as well, or maybe a consultant.
Well, and that's another thing, I have had the county approved consultant, and I've worked with that person. And, that has been another issue that we can talk about, and it's probably better for a better time. But, that's a whole nother ball of issues that should be addressed as well. So, thank you very much.
Are there any comments about the lack of provisionals or any timeline questions or?
As far as timelines, John Burks, if I may respond, that will all be hopefully captured in our studies as we move forward, is that we're tracking the time, so I don't unfortunately have an answer right now. I think, we can certainly look at the sort of historical information of how long it's taken, but we'll have better information around those timelines here shortly. And I think that as we gain success through that Gantt chart of our targets, as we pick up steam with that, it'll become more obvious about what our processing times will be. So I hope that that's helpful in the meantime.
Okay, Ms. Babini?
Thank you. I just had a follow-up comment to what Mr. Burke said in that, with the direction from the board is to prioritize folks that have their provisional licenses that are expiring by that date. And so unfortunately, the folks that do not have a provisional license are going to follow the people who do have a provisional license in our current priority reviews.
Okay. Hope that answers your question for the time being.
How many will they be working on per month, and how long will that take? Because by what they're saying, it could be next year.
You might have to come back to the microphone.
I should have stood up and walked. I'm sorry. The numbers aren't clear on how many provisional licenses are out there to be processed. And by the timeline of the state has set up of July 1st for those to be done, and how many per month can be processed. With that being said, it makes sense to say that every month there are new provisional licenses being turned over that need to be processed. So where does that put the people, especially, like I said, people like me, and there's hundreds of us who are from 2017, 2018, 2019. Where does that kind of put us? Because we could be looking at definitely not even being included into this grow season. Might not even be able to process until maybe sometime next year, and that's not even clear as well. While at the same time, people who are wanting to stay in this program are being taxed, as well as trying to stay afloat in their businesses at the same time, while not being able to produce what they've applied for.
Right. Okay, Ms. Babini.
If I can respond, currently the state is no longer accepting applications for provisional licenses. That ended March 31st, and that was solely for equity folks who had verified equity with the county. So to date, they are no longer accepting any provisional licenses, applications only annuals.
Good morning. Nice to see you all here. Nice to be in here again. I'm Corinne Powell. I am a 10,000 square foot cultivator. I have been in the program since before the ordinance. I am, of course, very sympathetic to all the folks who have had a great deal of difficulty getting through the program. I have been permitted in the county since 2017, with the state since 2018. And I'm just wondering, there's a small cohort of us whose permits have expired locally, renewed by the state earlier this year. We're not subject to cancellation, but we're not being reviewed for our renewals. And I don't know why that is. I would like to request, since those who have been permitted and who are in a queue or not yet assigned or something that has prevented a permit from being issued, we should be the easiest to process. So I'm hoping that you will look in the records and address those of us who should be permitted quickly. I'm interested particularly in the use of waivers for our fees, because several people at the department have told me that there's a 6 to 8 week delay to, quote, update the waiver. And I'm wondering what that is when it's the state agency that has agreed that people are eligible for waivers, why that is not something just accepted by the county. I don't understand that yet. So maybe somebody can answer that question. And I think in the past, when this original 10A17 was written, neither the county people, a staff, or the contractor who had done the original drafting had contact with cultivators. This process is moving forward. I want to be sure that cultivators are consulted and brought into the process. And one of the ways we can do that is to have information about the new evolution of the department and the training materials that are done, because sometimes if you are not actually with your hands and your shovels in the dirt being a cultivator, you miss some nuance. So the sooner we can get access to training information, hopefully we will be able to help respond to process in a more efficient way. So I'm asking for that as soon as possible. And I'm asking that if there are other committees and negotiations that develop, when are times when we should be making recommendations and suggestions that we haven't made yet because we don't want to muddy the waters on all the good work that has been done, most of it very, very central. So I'd like to know when other information will be received. Thank you.
Okay.
Elora
Babini.
Babini, thank you. I can respond at least to the prioritization of folks who have been issued originally. And a lot of those were not, had not gone through the sensitive species habitat review. Some have. Again, we are prioritizing reviews based on their provisional license expiration. We have still given local authorization to all of our folks who are in the process that may have expired locally, but we have not halted that authorization. They still have local authorization for the state for us, but we are reviewing all applications and renewals based on their provisional license expiration.
Okay, and I think with the question of communication, that it's just going to be ongoing and it will develop as it goes along. But I think the intent is to have active communication and participation. So, next. Oh. Was there a question, the waivers?
You're referring to the LEAP waivers?
Is
Yeah.
there a reason for delay on the waivers? For permit processing?
So I think it's a capacity issue based on what I've observed so far is we do process them, but not to the level that's required, if that makes sense. So yes, we get them and we process them as resources allow, which I'm sure that's not what anybody in this room wants to hear after all this time. But I only have control over so many things administratively to move those along. With the support of the executive office, it's picking up some speed now. So I'm hopeful, but we only have 3 out of the 8 administrative and fiscal staff. But we're making do as best we can, and I think that what you'll see, hopefully, you'll hear me say a lot, are in the deliverables. So I hear from the community that's something that needs to happen, and that is my goal to make that happen, and I hope that that is shown through our actions rather than our words is my goal, and I guess that's all that I have, at that moment.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. I was just thinking about singing something from Little Mermaid, A Whole New World, but I'm not actually going to do it because it wouldn't be a really good rendition, but it keeps going through my mind, like this is a whole different paradigm of communication and eye contact and direct information and back and forth. And lack of defensiveness, which is really welcome. Thank you for taking our considerations and our comments, and all of us for our patience to continue advocating through to where we are now. I feel hopeful, which is a good thing. I think I've started some of my comments saying I feel despair and frustrated and a lot of other negativity before it. So I have about 7 questions and comments, and I probably won't make it all the way through them, Chair Hashak, and so I'm just going to go until 3 minutes and then kind of await your direction. And I'm going to ask them through you as is recommended, but they're specific to some of the different staff members that are in the room. And it'd be great, some of the answers may inform my subsequent questions. So however you want to direct me, I'll follow your lead. The first one is to the Cannabis Department through John Hashak, thank you. I would still, I really appreciate all the transparency, and I ask for additional transparency. If we could have a really clear breakdown of what is in detail, the application or permit renewal review process, including a flow chart of what is looked at, then what, then what, then what. We've been asking for that for several years, and I'm hoping that with this group of people here that we can actually receive something that shows to an applicant what happens to their application once submitted, what different hands, eyes, or on whose desk does it go, where do things stall out, and why. The second point was in the efficiency study, the term significantly less than 200 hours was used. Could you give us some range of what actually is the number of hours, knowing that it's not exact and everybody's application is different, but internally the review timeline, if it's not 200 and it's significantly less, are we looking at 10% of that, 50% of that on average? Should I continue or should I wait?
Keep going.
Okay, great. I advocate again with both the grant process, LJAGP and LEAP, as well as applications and permit review and renewals, that there be an application conference with the applicant, one-on-one in person. This used to occur when it was in the Department of Ag. I recall having many of them with Siobhan Holmes at the time and going through document by document what was needed. And I found in some situations an agent could attend on behalf of the permittee or applicant, but in most, having the person right there that needs to understand what is being asked of them, and as well as to identify discrepancies between what their application materials were and what's shown on their site plan. The current method, and I know it's challenging with the current staff that we have, but the rounds of emails and 15-day letters, I do think there's room for even greater efficiency by just having an application conference with those that you see a number of issues. Not everybody needs that. Like Corinne Powell was speaking to, there's some people that have very simple applications. They should just get moved through more quickly. And maybe prioritization of those in this first cohort, the monthly expiration date cohort, review, look at who could go through more quickly and process those, and others that need a meeting, have a meeting with them to help speed things up.
Okay,
I'll pause.
one more.
Oh, one more? Okay, and then can I come back up?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What should I skip to next? I guess I'll go to the tax appeal issue. The other ones besides that have to do with SSHR and the site-specific CEQA. On the tax relief issue, this is something that I've emailed about with you, Supervisor Hashak. This is a one-person situation, and I would like to know the best remedy for them. The appeals for tax relief has a deadline to it. Once that passes, you cannot appeal receiving relief. That's my understanding. And I have a client whose property was impacted by fire, lost all of their product. The fire occurred, at a certain time, the product was lost, and they're still being charged for their minimum tax, and therefore they're deprioritized right now. They don't fit into the other avenues. Like, what are some ways when there is some sort of natural disaster or emergency for people to have a workaround of what the tax relief application deadline is?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go over to staff. We talked about the first one is the permit renewal review process, and that's something that will be worked on, right?
Yeah, and so Laura Babini, Chief Planner. So again, we do have folks who may have an easier application, some have a harder one. The only way to know that is by doing the review. And so I think that it would not benefit any of the applicants if we spend time looking through their whole application, say, oh, this is an easy one and this is a hard one, and put them in those two different stacks, than it would be just to have our consistent priority on how we're prioritizing application review. As far as the 200-hour range, I know Mr. Burks touched on, I think we'll have a better understanding of the actual review time once we get through that first round of July expirations, because we do have the time study going with our contract planners as well as our in-house staff for those applications. But until those applications are either issued or denied, we won't have a complete timeline on how long those reviews are taking. And we do have a good mix of, easier applications and harder applications in that July expiration. And so once we have that done, we can do a better time study on that.
Okay, in the application process, kind of the conversation, we've talked about that before. That's on your radar, right? If that's the most efficient way to do it, right? Okay. And then the tax appeal, relief, I guess, for county council, is there any idea about how to proceed with that or dealing with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think the situation that was described isn't really an appeal issue. What was described sounds like someone would be subject to the tax and the appeal wouldn't help them, regardless of the timeline issue, if the issue was crop loss, because crop loss is not currently a basis for tax relief in the ordinance. So there may be situations where someone, and this may warrant some inquiry, where there might be certain equitable principles that may extend timelines if someone was unable to file within the time period. We'd have to look at that a little bit more, but there might be situations where, for example, if someone's hospitalized, they might not be able to file within the timeline, but they still might have a valid basis for appeal. And there are some things that by operation of law might extend some of those timelines. We'd really have to evaluate those, I think, on a case-by-case basis, and looking at the particulars of the ordinance and how those relevant laws may apply in that context. But from what was described, the issue that was sought in appeal is not something that an appeal would be able to address.
Right. Okay. Next.
Good morning, Hannah Nelson, and I'm just going to sprinkle happy fairy dust over the whole situation in appreciation, because now I need to use my time efficiently and get on to the brass tacks, but I really do appreciate everybody's efforts very much. Last Friday was such a success, I believe, because it was insisted on that staff prepare a mechanism to receive input prior to then suggesting things and then another back and forth. It was like pre-baked before it got to the official committee meeting. And I think that everybody put in a tremendous amount of effort, and that's why we were able to accomplish so much in so little time with such positive united front outcomes. And I certainly appreciate the time and dedication that County Council's office spent with me in that. But I hope that is the model going forward. And Director Duncliffe, that this tension, understandable situation where you have to let people figure out the processes and start to see how they work before being inundated, I get it. But we've been doing this longer than any of you. And we are all united in the same goal. Don't burn out staff. Please, let's hold on to all of these good people. And let's get to where we need to get to as quickly as possible. And so I think that perhaps if you can think about ways that efficiently and effectively the input can happen at an earlier juncture, maybe then feels immediately comfortable, it may garner really helpful outcomes with efficiency and shared sense of mission, which is also an important thing to continue to foster at this tender juncture. Because as happy as we all feel, as much of a new day as it seems, a bunch of us have seen this movie before. So at any rate, don't want to be Debbie Downer here, just want to move forward. So I just urge that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's really, my grandma used to say it, it's really true. A few other hit items that I'd love to discuss more thoroughly. By the way, I think that fire was an acceptable basis for appeals at one point, so that might need to be removed. With respect to the LEAP grant, Elevate was not actually allowed to do most things, so I'm not sure that future reliance on them being able to do everything is a good comparison, depending on how much control the county wants to keep of certain aspects. It would be fantastic for us to have an org chart, even if it's a temporary org chart, with the list of topics of who in staff and the management is the appropriate people to go to with either suggestions or processes or whatever, so that we're respecting what you're building. And if it's a team, whatever, before those general meetings can start. We just really want to do things the way that is the most respectful and effective. Temporary assignment of full-time employees used to be a thing when I worked for government, like there were TFEs. I don't know if it's possible for admin staff for the county to get temporary staffing, literally just to help with some of the admin stuff. That'd be awesome. Some of the substantive topics that I hope we can go into, that I have some real logistical concerns about, have to do with the timing of Appendix Gs. I have some people who, there's a big company that was listed on as a service provider of helping people with preparing App Gs that just notified everybody they're no longer doing it, period. Midstream, without warning. So if there are July and August people, and we certainly hope the state will take over and that there won't be this gap, but we're in a situation right now where there's a whole bunch of people who thought they had somebody who was helping them, and because they were told by the department for so many years, you can't do anything until after you have a permit. I'm requesting a couple of things. One is the exploration of, for those people who are closer, do have a AppG that are in the July and August, for simultaneous submission with their application materials. Because I think from an efficiency standpoint, reviewing their application now and reviewing their AppG might really save a lot of time, rather than going back later. For those who don't have any AppG preparation and they're in the July and August, and again, fingers crossed, state will put the pause button, whatever, but we have to plan because there won't be time otherwise. We need to see if the county can pick up that work, and even if they're being charged, but they thought the county was doing it, then they were told they would do it, then they were told the county would be doing it, they were told there would be LEAP grants, then they were told the LJGAP grants. I mean, it's a mess, and there are people out there that potentially will have this gap. Hopefully not, but that is a conversation that needs to happen. Administrative permits. The dirty little term that has not been discussed very much. And I spent months and months and months pushing the state, and I was successful in getting the state to accept issued administrative permits. Some people in the zoning chart were required to have APs. Getting the state to accept those as the CEQA document, no problem. They're being converted to annual state licenses. There's a whole stack of administrative permits that were never processed by building and planning, because when MCD in one of the iterations was taken over, it was like, wait, we better figure out this process before we do that. Whatever, I understand. But there is another opportunity to be using traditional planners for processing APs, irrespective of the current permit requirement, not irrespective, but like slightly on a simultaneous track.
Okay.
I will hurry. Okay. So the other just big topics are the SSHR, and I'm sure tree removal, we need a date of when are we dealing with the rest of this. People are still in limbo. Alignment of local permits with state licensing, and then simultaneous assignments. So somebody is allowed to assign their permit once issued. They are, if we can allow them, as their number is up and they're being given a permit, they've been waiting and wanting to transfer it to somebody else. Can they submit this simultaneously so it's one fell swoop for staff time, for them, whatever? Few other ideas like that, happy to discuss more, really looking forward for a new day, and there's a lot more issues to go through. Thank you.
There's always a lot of issues that we need to deal with. So let's kind of go through the org chart and who to contact. Do you have any ideas on that, Mr. Duncliffe? How would
Sorry.
you like to deal with that?
Sorry about that. It just takes me a moment to find my mute button or unmute button. So I think that that is actually an item that will be fairly easy for us to address, and really in generality, Mr. Burks is here for all things related to process, procedure, and administration, and Chief Planner Babini is here for things related to planning processes and moving permits through. And of course, I am never going to be a wrong point of contact for anyone. So I think that I'll turn that over to Mr. Burks as far as follow-up. Do you think that there's a way to better operationalize or capture what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I'm happy to receive and hub that if that is your wish and your wish. You know, you can reach out to me. I don't have a problem with that. And the only reason why I would be hesitant, of course, is to make sure that I am available to staff. I mean, supporting staff right now is a big deal, but needless to say, there's a tremendous advantage to receive the feedback about the processes that we're ironing out. So I think, or what I would like to do, obviously with your approval, is let's try it. Just why don't you reach out to me? I'll take it in, between this meeting and the next, and then let's talk about how it went. You know, whether you're getting your needs met or you feel like you've been heard, and that what I'm capable of, because I just won't know until it happens, is my guess. So if you're okay with that as a solution, I say let's try it and let's see what happens.
Okay, and so the follow-up would be the Appendix G and that issue, and we've got a lot of things going on with that. So, Ms. Babini.
Sure. So I do have a response to that. You can't submit an Appendix G until you've gone through sensitive species habitat review and the air quality review and referral potentially. So there is no way to do that. If you don't have an application that's done that, then there's not really a way to prepare your Appendix G without that supplemental information.
Okay. I think the question might have been a little different than that. If Ms. Nelson, did you want to?
Yeah, let me just clarify. I think that what I'm suggesting is that in every way possible, simultaneous referrals go out and simultaneous submissions. So on the internal to MCD side, if as a file is picked up, immediately the air quality and the SSHR are put out rather than waiting, especially 6.5 years in. These people are serious about staying in. And simultaneously, the applicant is told, hey, if you want to submit your Appendix G materials, we still might all have to understand it has to be tweaked depending on the outcome of these other things, but it will potentially save so much time with simultaneous tracks at the same time. That's all.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Babini.
Elora Babini, Chief Planner. So consistently, and this isn't in every case, we see that through the review process, materials need to change, including your site plan. And we can't send a referral without having that completed for what is the proposed and what is actually happening on site, because there could be potentially expansion, or if you're building a new building and it's not on the site plan that we have from maybe 2 years ago when you went through a portal, we would need to make sure that those materials are consistent. And so we can't send that referral unless that is in-house and we can submit that with the referral.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Well, we had, and then the AP, administrative permits, maybe there's a process that can be used for that.
So I think that the state has received the administrative permits and they're in the process of reviewing those to see which ones can be used for state licensing CEQA. Not all administrative permits looked at the project as a whole, but only for the specific ask. And so not all APs can be used for your CEQA. To my knowledge, I think they're in that review process and haven't completed that yet, but they have received all the administrative permits that were approved through planning and building.
Okay. And then VegMod, do you have a timeline for that? Is,
Sorry, you're asking about the timeline on the adoption of the Vegemite ordinance? Is that what you're
yeah,
asking?
I think we were talking about
Yeah.
May 9th.
Yeah, May 9th is the date that the ordinance is effective. It has been adopted by the board. It's in the 30-day period before it becomes effective.
Okay. Okay. And then, all right, next, comments from the public. We have some Zoom comments, so. After the Zoom comments. And if it's all right with staff, if we can, we have 4 people online. We can keep moving through this. We might be able to get out of here at 11 o'clock or so. If not, then we need to take a break. So if people think we can keep moving through this, we'll do that. Okay? All right. Paul Hansberry. Online.
Hi, good morning. First of all, I wanted to echo kind of what Hannah was saying about the process of being informed before it becomes a statute and then debating and fine tuning. You know, building the airplane while it's flying is not the norm. So this process is a breath of fresh air, and I'm really glad that that you're taking seriously these the stakeholders and the people that actually know about the industry, actually the pioneers of the industry. Number 2, I did see the IT person during the budget hearings, and he expressed something that most of the people and the staff are reluctant to change. And I know that Cobblestone is software, but it's software that was designed and purchased a long time ago and designed for contract compliance, but for onesie-twosie kind of contracts. And updating it, I think that with the efficiency audit that's going on right now, I would hope that they would find out, especially for like grant programs where there are hundreds of applicants, that they would be able to fine tune that software to suit, what the needs are for the county. So with the efficiency audit that's going on, I would think that they would be able to discover where the delays are, where in Cobblestone in the process are the biggest bottlenecks, and address those and tune the software and update it so that it can be the most effective tool to be used, especially for things like grant programs where there are hundreds of contracts instead of onesie-twosie. Thirdly, there's been a lot of talk about something that I've been advocating, my partner Susan and I have been advocating for a long time. And a few people have already brought it up. Back in the original days with the Ag Department, it was a mandatory pre-inspection one-on-one meeting. It seems to me that this would be the most efficient way to do things. These people are farmers, they're not bureaucrats. And perhaps their interpretation and how they understand what they need to be doing in good faith isn't exactly what the department wants. But a one-on-one, the ability to schedule an appointment with staff. Now, I understand the staff is short and the budget is low. However, I think a solution might be that if you take part of the technical assistance funding that is already allocated, and technical assistance would be getting through a permit application, would be getting through a grant application, or a budget for a direct grant, or a LJAGP, would be furthering that to get to an annual license, all these steps that need to happen before you get to an annual license. So if taking the LJAGP funding to create a technical assistance program, which would mean having a person with general knowledge as a staff person to answer phones and have the schedule for the planners, be able to schedule the appointments and answer general questions would be very, very helpful. And then they would be able to sit down and talk and understand and clarify things in a minute instead of a long protracted email exchange back and forth. And the extra bonus would be that in the future applications, you'd be able to check the box and get extra points for having a technical assistance program established. So it's a win, 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 win. And I hope that it would be seriously considered. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. All right. Next comment is Michelle Schott.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my comment. I agree with all the positive feedback. I'm really glad that this is happening. I have two kind of a comment and a question. So dealing with Elevate Impact was difficult because the communication was very slow. And I think Hannah said it correctly, is that they weren't allowed to just do the process. Everything was reviewed. And I'm hoping that that won't happen again when the grant opens. And I understand that we're prioritizing getting people licensed, and I think that's really important. I'm not disputing that. But I do want to know what happens to the grants that were submitted, say, in October, the direct grants in October and November through the Elevate portal, that never, all those months went by and they never made it into Cobblestone. What happens to those? And I guess that's the end of my question. And again, bravo, you guys.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Schott. Mr. Burks, do you have a reply to what the status is of those that are in Cobblestone or
Mr. Chair,
lined up?
Steve Dunicliffe, I can speak to this a little bit in that we met last week with the county's previous contractor. And we've gotten a spreadsheet that includes the names of those people that had submitted and have not been processed. We're still in almost a forensic analysis right now, just trying to pull together all of the pieces. There are going to be future rounds of LEAP funding. We don't know today we don't know today if we're going to be able to cover all of the waivers and direct grants that have been coming in. The LEAP program is still, there's a lot of analysis that's still taking place as we try to find out where the applicants are, the prioritization and the funding.
Okay, thank you. Monique Ramirez.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Monique Ramirez, District 3. I am really appreciative of this entire meeting today and all of the due diligence that everybody is doing to help make this program run efficiently, and just really want to appreciate all of you. I also wanted to just highlight some really important needs right now with the LEAP grant. From an administrative perspective, I know that you guys are short-staffed and have to train people to kind of pick up the pieces where we are right now, but I do want to bring attention to people that have modifications that they needed to make requests for. I sent a request to the department, let's see, probably back in early March before my direct grant was going to expire. And because of the immense amount of storms that we were having, some of my work that I was planning to have done, I had to wait till the weather cleared up and the roads were better. And so I made a request to the department to extend my grant because I was coming up on it being expired, and I never got a response. And I think that was also right when the shift was happening with our director leaving. So I don't know if there's other people that have sent emails that have not been responded to. And I just, it's kind of in your guys' wheelhouse now. So I'm just waiting for a response because my contract has obviously expired now and the weather's finally getting better to purchase the final items that I had in my direct grant. So I'm just hoping that somebody can help us get that figured out. And yeah, there's a lot of other issues too, but I'm grateful that you guys are going to do everything you can and take this in chunks and try to figure it out, because it's really important, especially for this grant funding, because people are really needing it to keep their businesses going. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
All right. Did you have a comment, Mr. Burks?
Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind. So for an example with a direct grant where I'm at in understanding the process more in depth is I just last week learned how the appropriate pathway to do a modification and everything that's entailed, made, notes, and then I'm kind of formulating the how-to on with staff so that we can field those. So as far as an extension, just full transparency, I'm not there yet. I don't know what that takes or what that looks like, but, just as an example of what it's like to, be in my shoes at this moment in time is, part of it's learning for me and then, building that process around it. So, hang in there, Mo, I guess is my only, bit of advice at this moment in time. And I do want to say in my research, I did see some of those. I do believe that her specifically was one of them. So, yeah, so, as I come into that information and we formalize it, then we'll get it done as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. Heidi Wardhouse?
Thank you. I have what I hope is a simple question. These Appendix Gs with the county and the state working on an EIR for the program, are Appendix Gs still required? And at what point will Appendix Gs with the EIR stepping into its place, one assumes, at what point will Appendix Gs no longer be required? And I'm asking because I'm helping some people do their Appendix Gs, and there are a lot of questions around, do we even need to do these still?
All right, that seems like a question for County Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, the ordinance changes that have been discussed are still theoretical. It still needs to go to the board. Again, we are targeting May 9th as the date for that meeting. Once that is adopted, it does not appear that Appendix Gs will be necessary anymore. However, that's still contingent upon the board deciding to take those actions, et cetera. So that really will be the key moment.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments online? Okay, going back to Chantal.
Thank you. Can we continue that conversation about the Appendix G process you just spoke to, County Council? I am also somebody who's prepared Appendix Gs. I submitted about 8 over the last 18 months. I've received still comments back on 0 of them. Some of them were turned in. I think the earliest one was August or November, I don't remember now, 2021, I guess. So a couple questions on it is, what happened to the ones that were turned in? This is going to staff. When will we receive back feedback on those? Are they only going to be looked at during the time based upon their provisional license renewal date? I appreciate the change that's happening, the pivot midway, but it's also really like an enormous wave has crashed over as far as abundant money spent on Appendix G preparation. Those turned into the county and then them not being reviewed. I don't know what to tell people that I'm working with that hired me to do that or that paid for a biological assessment in order to support the Appendix G. I do think that, transitioning it to the state doing that review and no longer having the site specific is a better large picture resolution. But I'm wondering about all those that are in half, like 1 foot in one approach and 1 foot in the other approach. We need direct guidance from the county as to what to do for those people and have us play a guessing game for consultants and attorneys that work in this realm so that we just tell people they should or they should not proceed forward with having those documents prepared. Hannah spoke to this partially already as well, and Heidi just spoke to it too. I think that there's different categories of people based upon the timeline of when their provisional renews relative to this potential ordinance change and new environmental document charting a new course. And so what I ask is, like in other programs that I work in, when there's a question, we ask the permitting agency to give us the guidance so that we follow that. We've had to do a lot of guessing over the last couple of years because we weren't getting direct, clear information, and it resulted in an abundant waste of resources of the counties and individuals as well. And so I ask now if you would just please tell us really clearly, if you are a July 1 expiration, or let's say May 1, July 1, go through the calendar, what should we do for Appendix G? And if you're not reviewing CEQA materials at the time of application review, we need to know those two scenarios, if you're a permit or you're an applicant, and just tell us what to do so we stop guessing around about it. One more point to make regarding, go ahead.
Can we get clarification on that?
Sure.
If there is clarification to be had at this moment. Yeah. Ms.
Can-
Babini?
Yeah, can you restate exactly what the question is that you're asking? For the, is it the CEQA when for the July people, or I just need clarification?
It's a larger question than that. It has to do with a programmatic recommendation from the county as far as what do we do now for Appendix G materials. For people, regardless of their expiration date that already submitted, will those be reviewed or not? If they're not reviewed because there's been a transition to a different approach, are they going to get refunded? Like what, they've already spent, some of them $20,000, $30,000 preparing the materials at the county's direction over the last 24 to 36 months. And it seems there's, I'm confused, and the question, the narrowness you're giving it is not the scope of what my whole question was. And I have a second part to my comment to make, but I'll wait until after this dialogue happens.
Okay.
Sure, and I'm not sure if this is a me or Christian.
If I could take a stab, Mr. Chair.
Yes, certainly.
As it stands, I think what we're discussing, and I think Ms. Nelson put it really well before, that essentially it will be great if this legislative change works, if it streamlines the process, and if we're able to shift the environmental review onto the state. I think things are looking very positive at that point, but at this moment, the old regime is what we are under, and we cannot say definitively that there will be a switch to the new regime. So we do have to be planning for both. Now, I think there's potentially a room for a little bit of opportunity in there, in that there may be people, even after we're able to switch over the ordinance, and I think this warrants some more discussion, both internally and with the state. There may be people who have their Appendix G documents done, and it may be easier to rely on that document to get them through the state environmental review than it is to have the state environmental document generated at that level. That's going to be sort of a cost benefit. That's going to be something that's going to have to be discussed with the state, because really this is satisfying their environmental requirements. But I think there's a desire on the part of the department, certainly her desire on the part of the state, to try and be as efficient as possible on that. So at the moment, I cannot advise or recommend anyone to rely on that new process happening. We just don't know until the legislative body acts, which will be on, again, we are expecting May 9th to be the date for that decision to be made. In the meantime, even if there is going to be a change, there may be some benefits to people who are 95% of the way there, that rather than hold off in anticipation of a change, continuing on this pathway still might actually get them to an annual license faster.
And then the ones that have been submitted already, is there any plan to review them, or are they going to be dealt with with the Gantt chart timelines? Right.
Elora Babini, Chief Planner. So that was the previous direction that we had, because we can't really review the CEQA documents without making sure they have an active local county permit. And so if they're an applicant, or the ones that were previously accepted were all for renewals at that time, we are again reviewing renewals and applications based on their state expiration. Okay. And that includes their CEQA documentation.
Okay, thank you.
May I continue?
Yeah.
I have submitted multiples that have a current permit. It is not due for renewal. They've already gone through the renewal. The CEQA materials were not reviewed. So the response, our communications are missing. There are still some, I believe, that are with the county that are complete. All of the materials are current or have been updated every single month as needed, because as we started to see notices come back about site plans or deficiencies along during the time of a renewal review or application review, we as consultants modified our approach to correct those on the fly prior to you getting to your time of renewal. So my first one submitted, for example, were Happy Day Farms. They were an exemplary model, me following the examples given by the state and the local jurisdiction to ensure that they were thorough, complete. Any subsequent changes, we then updated the county about them. And I don't remember the date of the 2 different farm licenses renewals, but waiting until they get to their provisional license renewal. I guess what I'm asking for is that those that have already been submitted and have current permits, for there to be a track for those CEQA documents to be reviewed outside of the provisional license deadline rolling Gantt chart method that you're using right now. I think the simplification to going with the provisional transition date is a wonderful simplification to get some sort of guidance and management to how to run the program, but there are some situations that require a different approach than that. And I leave it to the county staff and direction from the board to figure out what those are. And there are some that we're advocating for. They're not due for their renewal. Their CEQA materials were submitted. They've been waiting in the queue for a long time. Please go look at those. I don't think there's that many of them. How many completed CEQA materials have you received? Review those. Just do the process. I'd like to speak about the SSHR process. It's substantial.
Okay, direct it to me.
Great, thank you. So we had a few rounds of dialogue with the former director regarding the SSHR document, the guidance material that was developed by CDFW, and requests for there to be a fine-tuning of the referral process of what the county's internal review and then what was referred to CDFW. There was direction from the board back to staff to fine-tune that, and we've asked multiple times, we, myself as an individual, and MCA as an entity, asked multiple times for that referral review criteria to be made public and to give us back a report on that as what has happened. I don't think we've received that yet. At the time, there was I worked directly with CDFW and talking through their through individual clients, and I wrote their LSA that then were reviewed for SSHR, talking through why they were referred to CDFW and determining that the referral, there was an over-referral process going on. And so I'm asking for an update and kind of a hope that that has been corrected so that we understand what is the county internal process for referring to CDFW, what is the guidance materials that they are using with their contract planners and internal staff.
Right, so it goes back to that question we dealt with last summer, which we never really got an answer to, was a scoping tool for what gets referred to CDFW for this sensitive species and habitat reviews. So do we have any clearer idea on that scoping tool? It sounds like things are running fairly smoothly with the SSHR referrals, but is there a clear guidance on that?
So currently we have the Exhibit A that was created, I believe, internally by staff and by discussion with CDFW, which is what they were comfortable with allowing staff internally to review. A lot of the threshold that we hit is the project expanded since 2016. And for folks that meet that contiguous expansion affidavit, you know, we're able to review that material as well and not do that referral if there's no other hits on that scoping tool that we utilize, the Exhibit A. But if they've expanded outside of that, they automatically must be referred to Fish and Wildlife, and that was in discussion with Fish and Wildlife staff.
Okay, thank you.
A response on that, in the referrals that I handled or that I received knowledge that they had been referred. So 2 comments on that is one, when the department determines that the referral to CDFW is going to happen, that the applicant or permittee be notified immediately. That hasn't been happening, and that needs to happen because there's this we don't know who has been referred to DFW and who has not. And second, a number of those that were referred that I worked with were based upon water source documentation and the county's incorrect interpretation of water source documentation that was required. My specialty is water law, and I found the county's internal review process to be ill-informed and over-referring, particularly related to water source documentation. And so again, I asked for the review standard that the county developed internally and that DFW agreed to. The last we heard from Kristen Nevedal about it was that it was like a yes, no, maybe, 3 questions. And it was 2 of them were going to result in a referral, I believe was my understanding. It might have been the other way around. If it was an unknown, it was going to be referred. And it had to be a clear yes or a no for it not to be referred. And so we asked in the past for there to be more discussion with stakeholders to inform the county, particularly with like an environmental consulting cohort, to inform the county how better to do that process so there's less referrals. At that same time, then site plans and water resource documentation could be handled all in once.
Okay, thank you. I think your comments were duly noted. Okay, Ms. Nelson.
Thank you. And again, I just want to start with my happy place, because I know when I start getting on the list, it sounds all listy, and I just want to start with the happy place. Forgive me if my tone slips into, Okay, so I did actually have the benefit of a conversation with the DCC's attorney regarding the process of the switchover, and there are still components that I think need to be addressed, and I would respectfully request that in addition to the county's discussions with the DCC, that we encourage a practitioner's scope to help at the same time, because I have access, I'm one of the few people that does have access to the DCC's attorney, and of course I've had the benefit of county counsel, but sometimes it's very helpful if we all are on the same page so it's not shuttle diplomacy, because I think there are areas that dovetail into both lands, and certainly there's an amount of work that has to be done by the county and the state without input of anybody else, but I think that these discussions would benefit from a lens of on-the-ground practicality of issues that, because the people negotiating, the attorneys negotiating, don't understand how it pragmatically plays out, and some of the excellent newer staff who do understand but don't realize that these things are coming down the pike. Anyway, that's my plea on that. With respect to SSHRs and what Chantal just said, and it really is about, the scoping tool is the Exhibit A. The Exhibit A, there was an agreement to look at refining it and narrowing its scope so that the pool of potential referrals, just as Chantal said, was more appropriately tailored, and Angela Liebenberg from CDFW agreed with us, and Chantal and I volunteered to be on a team, and that. So I think we're just talking about moving forward with a re-examination of the tool, not stopping what's going on, but as a method to help everybody be in line with the law and not over-refer, but at a rate that is comfortable for CDFW, making sure it's still within their requirements. And then, with respect to the simultaneous referrals for SSHRs to CDFW, if they have to be made, and to air quality, I do think that at this juncture, there are enough people who have gotten, there are no site plan changes. There are certainly still those that are going on. But if there's a mechanism to look at where simultaneous referrals can happen, I think that it's an endeavor worth engaging in. And I understand it's a really tenuous balance to kind of be doing the substantive review and figuring that out at the same time, but I just really want to encourage that, because I can clearly see on my end cases where there's not going to be any more changes. There haven't been any more changes. They've gotten green check marks multiple times in a row. Like, come on, folks, we can do this. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I would encourage an evaluation. And that brings me to a larger point, and that is just because, and this is one of the beauties of what we've seen over this past month or so, just because things were done in a certain way in the past doesn't mean they have to be done the same way going forward. And so my broader question is, in the review of how things are operating, has there been a review of the review? In other words, why does it have to be done this way? Why is this actual piece of information required or re-referred for 4 times till you get a green check mark on wording of something rather than more substantive thing, whatever it is, I just hope. And because, again, the current status of staff is that we have, now senior planner who was trained in and appropriately going as fast as she can down training new people on the specifics that were required before, but that was under leadership that placed an emphasis on certain requirements that may have not been appropriate to our current mode. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think that, if I could just add.
Yeah, please.
In my conversations with staff, is that there is a new approach to making things work, and I think we saw that on Friday, that people want to streamline things, again, streamline, as much as possible, and to look at things in a new way to try to make sure that it's the appropriate way and the most efficient and effective.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I do believe that, and I'm just reminding at every opportunity, things that we see that might be helpful. Anyway, LEAP modifications, there are, for example, and this dovetails nicely the AP conversation and the LEAP conversation. So yes, it's true that not all administrative permits would lead to an annual license at the state level, but what I call very colloquially a full AP, which is really where there's been a site-specific review and referral to agencies and a staff report and whatnot, not for things like setback reduction only, although depending on how extensive that got, it might have resulted in it, not for not having a residence when you're in zoning that required a residence, not for stuff like that, but for the quote-unquote full AP, it's definitely a mechanism. So people who had LEAP grants that included a portion of their budget for finishing the Appendix G, but because it turns out they had an administrative permit and they were able to now convert, and I've got a number of them, no longer they need to spend the money on their solar or whatever they couldn't include in their initial budget. So that's another reason to modify and understanding the timing, but they need to switch gears.
Okay, Ms. Nelson, if you have specific issues, maybe you could take those up with staff.
Sure.
In your afternoon meeting, or?
Sure. And
Okay,
one just last general question about the tree removal. The issue was not about when is the ordinance final. It's about the affidavit, the implementation. We still haven't seen another draft of the affidavit. The logistics of how the shift in approach from veg mod letters to how it's going to be handled now, and the timing of when we're going to get to deal with those issues. And then secondly, there were a lot of people who scrambled and did submit in accordance with the old initial veg mod requirements. They hired outside people, they submitted evidence, blah, 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 never heard back, and they're still in limbo. And being in limbo affects so many different issues. So just wanted to make a plea for us getting something on the books in terms of dates to deal with the veg mod issue 2.0. Thank you.
Yeah. County Council, are there any other dates of implementation of the veg mod changes?
I think I'd defer to the department. They can't actually implement it, until the ordinance is in place. We have been working with them on the affidavit and process there. I defer to them if there's any other comment they may have.
Yes, I can say that we actually have worked on an internal procedure to accompany the affidavit, and that's going to be obviously a huge component of how we deal with that moving forward. So I believe we're wrapping that up kind of internally, and we're going to be definitely ready, by May 9th to,
All right.
Roll that out.
Well, thank you.
But we have no information on the next version of the affidavit that the board directed to be changed. We don't have any idea of what the process is. And again, a pound
Okay. Okay, Corinne?
Okay, Corinne Powell again. I am more concerned now than when I spoke earlier because, as I heard Alora say, if you do not have a permit, you cannot proceed with your CEQA review. That's problematic. I believe that I need the assistance of this body here in the committee to instruct the department to continue processing people like me who are not in some kind of deprioritization issue, a VegMod issue. Elora processed my application a couple of years ago. She can maybe remember it is the same. The county has invested quite a bit of money in an aerial satellite surveillance company and use of a cartographer on staff. It should be really easy to see where changes have or have not been made so that you don't disincentivize people to do the right thing as they should have all along. If your taxes are paid, if you're provisionally licensed by the state, it should be easy. If what she's saying now, based on direction, if she's only processing people whose licensure is going to be compromised if they're not through our county process by July, somebody like me is going to be waiting until way after July before I'll be permitted, before I can apply for CEQA. So I'm in a catch-22 that I think is going to require direction from you supervisors to say, get this cohort through. That's my concern. Thank you.
Okay. We will have a conversation with staff on the best way to proceed with that. Okay.
Scott Ward, retired building official, 28 and a half years experience in administering and issuing ministerial permits, which this is. Planning and building takes in a permit, ministerial permit application for a building. They route it to Public Works, if needed, Health and Planning simultaneously. There's no reason why this ministerial permit cannot be routed to all the agencies that are applicable simultaneously. If there's a change in review or requirements for any other agency, that change gets rerouted to the other agency, so there's a consistency of review. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll go to public expression, agenda item 3A.
Hello again, supervisors and county staff. This is Michael Katz, Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. Thank you for these conversations today. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to come, and we appreciate staff's willingness to continue to engage in those conversations. In our memo, we had included a bunch of different procedural recommendations, many of which have been already discussed today. I wanted to address a couple of them just for the record, as we are going to then hopefully set up a time to discuss further with the department. We already discussed publishing the outlining of every step in the permitting process from application to permit issuance. Would be great to get a complete list of all the current versions of all documents being required by MCD in one place, because apparently that some people have older documents. We just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what's current and where those can be found. We agree with providing the opportunity for in-person permit application meetings. On any documentation sent to operators that is not actually related to a potential denial, we request that any document have removed from it any unnecessary language that threatens permit denial from requests for documentation. So unless it's actually a denial, instead of saying do this or you will be denied, we would just request that that type of language be removed wherever possible. We would also request that in the 15-day notices that there be a provision included in that document that alerts people that they can request an extension beyond 15 days if that is not already in there. On the Ag Pass program, I've recently heard from some folks that they haven't heard back, but then I started to hear folks say that they have started to hear back. So just wondering globally where that program stands, if the ag department has to be involved, or now that we're getting out of rainy season into the summer, just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to sign up for that. And then the one thing I wanted to mention related to the equity program, but this also could relate to other things. Right now, equity fee waivers are required to be printed and then brought in person to the department and then in person to the tax collector. So these physical printings and then drivings not just creates unnecessary paper, but also carbon outputs. So it is our hope that we can shift any of those submissions to digital formats as opposed to physical formats, in line with the board's desire to reduce paper and carbon outputs as well. And that, I believe, is everything that I have for the moment. So thank you again, and I look forward to future conversations.
All right, thank you. So that comment about the digital format for that, I'm sure we're looking into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was an aspect that I wasn't even aware of, to be totally honest, because I was so focused on what we already had in our possession. I didn't consider that component, but yeah, cheers for bringing that up. I will check into that right away, because that seems like possibly a pathway. I can't say for sure, because sometimes ink signatures are important, but let me look into it. I've made note.
Okay, and the Ag Pass, I don't know if anyone here has. Ms. Babini.
I do. So we are working closely with IS. There were some hiccups in the original request since it is the first time we've done this process. The Cannabis Department initially reviews them, and then they will have to be issued by the Ag Department. Right now, we're working on training one of our staff persons. So as Mr. Katz had said, some folks have heard back. We are prioritizing those based on how they came in. And so once those are completed, applicants will be notified on the next steps of the process on how to come in and get those Ag passes issued by the Ag Department.
Okay, thank you, because I know that was an important thing that we worked hard and it was a long process to make sure it was right. And so I'm glad that we're still working on it and people should know about it. All right. So with item 3B, approval of minutes of the March 27th regular meeting.
Through the chair, if I may, Kim Saylor, Deputy Clerk, we have one more caller online for public expression.
Okay. Could you bring that caller on?
Hi, everyone. It's Mo, District 3, Monique Ramirez. I just wanted to touch really briefly on that whole piece of the going to the tax collector to get the stamp of approval. I just wanted to say that they did actually make an exception for me the last quarter, and I was able to have them do it electronically. So it does highlight that it is possible, but they did say that that was just an exception for my situation as a one time, and that normally they don't do it that way. But if we can find a way to streamline that, I think it would just be great for everybody, and have it also, you know, the stamp still happens. It's just then they could scan it electronically and send it over even to the MCD department potentially, and like just finding ways to streamline these processes to help make it be effective for everybody, I think is the ask here. And I just want to say one more time how grateful I am to everybody that's sitting in the audience right now, and obviously all of the county government staff that is in that room today, and how we're working together to really listen to each other and try to figure out ways to make everything work better. This is what I know that has been the goal of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance, as well as all individual stakeholders that come in and make public comment. We always have wanted to work together and see change work for everybody. And so I'm just really grateful for everyone's dedication to the cause. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but you guys are awesome. Thanks so much.
Okay, Ms. Ramirez, Mr. Burks gave a thumbs up to the digitalization of the documents, so, okay. All right, so moving on to item 3B, approval of minutes of the March 27th, 23 regular meeting.
Move approval of the minutes.
Okay, I'll second it. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, can we have roll call vote?
Chair Hashtag?
Yeah.
Supervisor Mohan?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Did we need to make a motion on any of the 2A items.
Mr. Chair, I understand from Clerk of the Board that it may be better for their records if you, I don't think you legally need any action, but it may be better for their records and for the minutes just to have a vote to accept the report.
Okay,
Move we accept item 2A, the report from the Cannabis Department.
okay, I'll second it. Roll call.
Supervisor Mulhern?
Yes.
Chair Hashak?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, announcements. Any announcements? Seeing none, we'll adjourn the meeting at 11:09. And thank you, everyone, for your participation today.